The War of 1812 was a complex and often misunderstood conflict between the United States and Great Britain that lasted from June 1812 to February 1815, sometimes referred to as the Second War of Independence. It was driven by issues of national sovereignty, trade restrictions, territorial ambitions, and Native American resistance. Though it ended in a stalemate with no clear victor, the war significantly shaped the young American Republic's national identity and global reputation. Causes of the war: impressment of American sailors. One of the most inflammatory causes was the British Royal Navy, as practice of impressment forcing American sailors into British service. The U.S. viewed this as a violation of its sovereignty and an attack on its citizens' rights. Trade restrictions and economic pressure. The Napoleonic Wars in Europe had led Britain to impose blockades that restricted American trade with France. The U.S. saw this as a breach of its neutral trading rights and responded with economic sanctions like the Embargo Act of 1807, which hurt the U.S. economy more than Britain's. British support for Native resistance. The British supplied weapons and support to Native American tribes resisting U.S. expansion in the Northwest Territory. American settlers and politicians blamed Britain for frontier violence and used it as further justification for war. War hawks and national pride. A group of young nationalist U.S. congressmen known as war hawks, led by Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, pushed aggressively for war. They saw it as a chance to uphold American honor and possibly annex Canada. Key events and battles. Failed invasions of Canada. The U.S. launched multiple invasions into British-held Canada, expecting support from local populations. Instead, American forces faced stiff resistance and suffered several embarrassing defeats, including the loss of Detroit, naval battles, and privateering. While outmatched in size, the U.S. Navy scored morale-boosting victories, such as the USS Constitution defeating H.M. Guerriere. American privateers also captured or disrupted British merchant ships, hurting Britain's economy. The burning of Washington. In retaliation for the U.S. attack on York, British troops invaded and burned several buildings in Washington, D.C., including the White House and Capitol. This was a low point for the U.S., but it galvanized national unity. Battle of Fort McHenry. British forces bombarded Baltimore's Fort McHenry, but failed to take it. This battle inspired Francis Scott Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner, which later became the U.S. national anthem. Battle of New Orleans. General Andrew Jackson led a decisive and famous American victory against a major British force ironically fought after the peace treaty had already been signed. This battle turned Jackson into a national hero and boosted American morale. Treaty of Ghent and aftermath. The war officially ended with the Treaty of Ghent, signed on December 24, 1814. The treaty restored pre-war boundaries and made no mention of impressment or maritime rights, effectively ending the war in a stalemate. However, the treaty did establish commissions to settle border disputes, easing future U.S.-British relations. Consequences and legacy. Nationalism and unity. Despite military setbacks, the war instilled a new sense of national pride. The U.S. had stood up to one of the world's greatest powers and survived. Native American setbacks. The war weakened Native American resistance in the Northwest and South, leading to further U.S. expansion and forced relocations. Political impact. The war exposed weaknesses in U.S. infrastructure and led to increased support for a stronger federal government. The Federalist Party, which opposed the war and even threatened secession at the Hartford Convention, collapsed shortly after. Rise of American industry. British blockades during the war disrupted imports, prompting the U.S. to grow its own industries. This helped spark the American Industrial Revolution. Andrew Jackson's rise. The war launched the political career of Andrew Jackson, who would later become president and a defining figure in 19th century American politics. Conclusion. The War of 1812 was not a war of territorial gain or dramatic shifts in power, but it was pivotal for the young United States. It tested the country's resilience, affirmed its sovereignty, and sowed the seeds of a stronger national identity. While often overshadowed by other conflicts, the war played a crucial role in shaping the path of American history.